Hi, I'm Randy Berry with Eagle Vistas. We teach young men and young ladies from zero time to become ag pilots, whether they're already pilots or not, as well as we do intermediate and advanced courses. We also offer consulting and many other things. And through our last several years of operation, there's been a lot of questions that have been asked pretty much on a standard basis. So I thought I'd come up with a small series, and I'm going to call this series basically everything you want to know about crop dusting but we're afraid to ask. And we're going to start the first session. This will be the first of the first 5, I think it is, units. And we're going to discuss basically the evolution of crop dusting, how it's occurred. Oh, we won't go way back to the 50s in that area, but probably where most of us have started is like in the early 70s or 80s or 90s. And there was a definite transition through all these times and all these periods. Okay. One of the biggest changes that occurred in the 1980s was the advent of the turboprop engine that replaced the radial engine for the most popular airplane or engine power plant in this business. The first turboprop airplane was put on out in Arizona by Bill Marsh on a Thrush. It was a Garrett engine. And then a few years after that, Fred Ayers made the Pratt & Whitney PT6, a very, very popular conversion for the Thrush. And then eventually Leland Snow used it also, and it's become pretty much the standard. You either have a Pratt & Whitney PT6 type turbine, a Walther type turbine, which GE owns now, and then the Garrett turbine. Now I won't get into the involvement other than it's changed. But what's changed mostly with the advent of the turbine is the speed of application. And that's where the trick is. And that's where the boundary layers lie and the categories change. It's when you increase speed. So let's go back to the 70s, 80s, when the big airplane at that particular time was not the 802 turbine, but the 600 horsepower Thrush or the 600 horsepower A model AgCat. Back then, because we had slow airplanes, generally you had an area that was close to your home base, and you worked out of that strip and did everything, say within a 10 or 15 mile radius, because it was convenient to go out, come back, and load here. But a lot of these farmers and a lot of the other farmers, as you started growing your business, wanted you to come out 15 miles here, 20 miles here, 30 miles here, and do work. Well, at 100 miles an hour, even 120 miles an hour, if you start thinking about it, 120 miles an hour ground speed is a mile every 30 seconds. So that means if we're 20 miles out here, that 30 seconds going out, 30 seconds coming back, 20 minutes of our 1 hour working time will be ferrying and non-productive. So you can see that by flying one time out, having a ground unit and another place to work out of here, and I'm talking about not necessarily a county airport or a paved runway or anything like that. I'm talking about dirt roads, pastures, right-of-ways, things that we used to work off in order to stay close, levees, dikes. Because we could go out here, land, have a mixing rig, some kind of a water source, suck out of a canal, or have the farmer ferry you stuff, whatever. And then you would have about a 10-mile radius here, and anything that would come out here, we would work out of this strip. Then if it was a bigger operation, multiple airplanes, as soon as we got done here, we might have a second crew that's already set up over here. So they can move from there to there while we're finishing up. As soon as we get done, boom, the airplanes come over here, we do our work, come home, put the airplanes in the barn at night, and put them to bed. Okay. This is pretty much a common practice to have all these little satellite airplanes to eliminate that unproductive and very inefficient ferrying time. With the advent of the turbine and the faster speeds, the operators found, and once again we also got to remember this is in the 80s with the turbine has started coming in. Fuel was still less than $1 a gallon, or not much more than $1 a gallon in most cases, and that's for avgas as well as Jet A. But with the advent of the turbine, they realized that they could have their base of operation just like they always had, where they have their hangar for maintenance and bring the equipment in and everything at night, do winter maintenance. When they had to do stuff in this area, or this area, and this area where they used to go and send a truck, a trailer, and usually 2 loaders and a fuel tank and everything else in order to work there, that 20 mile. Well, when we start going an extra 20 miles an hour faster or so, we start eliminating that ferry time. So when the fuel was less expensive, it was very much a profitable deal to work this, fly like hell, going faster than with the turbine, get your work done, and come back and do this base. It worked really great because he didn't have to have those 2 men and the equipment at that particular time. Labor was more intensive than fuel costs. So as you can start seeing now, there's a paradigm shift that's going to occur. So he would come here. And another nice thing he liked about it, instead of being over here working and then finding out that he had the next load over here, down here at this corner, so he had to go send a crew from there over here, and then before you know it, somebody called that afternoon for the next morning and it was here. And he says, oh my God, if I could have went from here to here, I wouldn't have spent near as much money or near as much time doing this. But with a turbine, it didn't matter which direction, what field or whatever the job was next, it would allow them to go out, come back, and work this out in a commercial aspect, and very, very, very profitable. Now, because the fuel costs are getting much, much more expensive, they're not $1 a gallon anymore, you know as well as I do. Aviation fuel in a lot of places are up to $6 a gallon. And they're not going to be making it a whole lot longer. We're looking for alternatives. Jet A is readily available, but you're going to pay in bulk with that, even up to $4 an acre or gallon for it, or even more. So once again, now the paradigm shift has become energy is more costly than labor. So going back to the concept of the strategy of having the satellite strips, saving that ferry time, even though it's a turbine, as long as you can find a suitable airplane to work out of that satellite strip, the better off you are. Or even having 2 smaller airplanes that could go to one or the other. Or if it was a farmer or a co-op type of thing, of just 2 or 3 operators that got together, farmers that got together to start buying a little airplane and start it, you could see that they're also going to have that main base. And just like they're planning, the strategies are the same. When you're planning, you go out, you do everything around the base usually first, if it's dry enough. Then you go to one area, then you go over to the next area, then to the next area, and get all your planning done. Because you know how you planted it. You're not going to drive your tractors from here to here and then back over here and then back over here, because you're going to wear your tires out and it's not very efficient. So by doing this and knowing your own plans and your own schedule, instead of just taking in random things, you can see that this is even more beneficial and more profitable to a farmer-owned operation, if that's the way you decide to go. So this talks about some of the efficiencies of spraying and how it's done, if you ever thought about it. And probably the smartest thing to think about here is, how does a farmer or a helicopter work? Once again, they are eliminating any ferry if they can possibly help it. They will actually have a main base that they park the airplane at, but when they go to a field, every field is a satellite place, usually, if it's any size at all, or at least all touching around. They'll pick a little place right here at the corner where they have a water source. They'll take off and land right on the trailer for a helicopter and work right here to come right back and land. They're eliminating that ferry time. And it's a very much, you have to do that with a helicopter because there's so many parts moving so often, and they have to be replaced in so many hours, whether it needs to or not. Kind of difference between the operating expense of a tractor or a combine. The more time you have things moving fast and often, the more maintenance issues there are. So that's the only way a helicopter can stay in even close to business, even though they probably are going to charge $1 to $2 more an acre. Now they're going to tell you, and you'll see later on in the thing, why they're going to tell you it does a better job and everything else. The reason it does a better job, once again, is because it's slower. Okay? But on a helicopter situation, once it's going faster than 40 miles an hour and hits translational lift, which I'll explain much more detail in a further unit, it's not that much of a difference between what's it. Just the same way you do with your ground equipment. You know, if you had to drive your ground sprayer out here and do 5 or 10 or 15 acres, whatever, how many acres you do, 100 acres low, whatever. If you had to leave that field, drive down the road, go back to your main base to get loaded with water and chemical every time and make the mix, guess what? It's going to cost you a whole lot more money for fuel, for tires, just everything else, and you probably couldn't even do it affordably. However, you know, the same concept is true with airplanes, you know. That's what they're doing. They got this big county airport over here, and they're flying these 20 and 30 miles with these fast turbines to go out there and do your spraying. It is not very efficient. So because it's not very efficient, and these airplanes cost a tremendous amount of money because they're made to do a whole lot of volume, and they cost a whole lot of money per hour to operate. Minimum, I would say, on a turbine airplane is close to around $1,500 per Hobbs hour gross would be a target that I would be looking for on something, say, like a 502 or a turbine thrush. And you're just not going to be able to do that with helicopters or your ground equipment. Turbines can do it because they can get by, but it's very inefficient. And because it does cost more money, you're basically, when you give them, when they charge you a price per acre, you're subsidizing them. Because it does a better spray job? No. Because it costs them more money to have that equipment to do your spray job and many thousand other people's spray jobs to pay for that big piece of equipment. So it's really not benefiting you as much as it is the operator, which hopefully keeps his expenses down. Now, one thing I will tell you about an operation, and there's a lot of different operators just like any other business in the world, but if you have an operator that you've been working with and you're comfortable with him, you're happy with his performance, he does quality work, he does it on time, he's willing to change the volume with you. Let's try 3 gallons an acre, 8 gallons an acre. I need to put out some cover crop. If you have a man that's working with you and is willing to work with you like that and have a history, you would be foolish to try to do anything else. I'm telling you that's the truth from many, many years of experience and seeing other people try to do it when they didn't really need to, and we're just reinventing the wheel. Unless you have an extremely large operation and they can't give you the service, there's really no need. If it's a good operator, and I would always recommend that you look for an operator that's a member of the National Association, just to maintain a certain standard of professionalism. So, we're looking about how we work airplanes, and can an airplane work like this helicopter? Yes, it can, but not every airplane. Now, 802s, 602s, big giant turbine crop dusting airplanes take a much more skilled pilot, but they are also much more delicate for ground handling. I mean, they're big and bulky, but you can do a lot of damage in a short period of time. They're faster, they land faster, they take off faster, whereas something like an old Ag Cat or a Pawnee or something that's a little smaller, you can work off of wheat stubble, you can work off of dirt roads. There's lots of times that you could even, you know, if you have, like in the Midwest, where you have mile oil roads everywhere, just 2 homesteads in the thing. Once again, being able to land an airplane on this road. If you block off that road and you have permission of all the people in charge and go run it through the sheriff, there's no reason you couldn't put a water tank, say right here on this strip if there's no power line, block this off, come in, land, load, take off, start spraying. Land, load, take off, start spraying. So now you're working like the helicopter, and now you're working like your ground equipment, so you're much more efficient and you're not losing a whole lot of wasted time, money, and effort ferrying 20 and 30 miles to get to the place, because that is the very worst part of efficiency. So, this will complete this segment of everything you want to know about crop dusting but are afraid to ask. I hope you'd look at all of them. I would more than happy talk to you on the phone, any ideas you may have, or you may disagree with me. That's fine, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. This is all things that I have gotten from my own personal experience. So thanks for watching, and we'll look for you on the next stage. Bye.